Hello, I'm Dr. Beverly Wright, and welcome to Tag Data Talk. With us today, we have Andrew Simmons, who's in charge of the retail CPG vertical at Wavicle Data Solutions. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Beverly.
Excellent. We're talking about the top challenges and opportunities GenAI brings to the retail experience, a topic that's going to be near and dear to just about everybody.
On one side or the other.
Yeah, but let's start off with a little background. Tell us, why are you so cool?
I'm glad you asked. Well, I tell you what brings me to here today, brings me to the podcast studio today. I hope that makes me cool. I'd say more or less 18, 19 years in the data space. I'd say with experience comes a little perspective, hopefully, about the evolution of trends. I remember, so I probably joined up in the 2008, 2009 space, basically been in it my whole career. So at that time, trying to remember what some of the buzzwords were at that time, big data was definitely hot.
Oh gosh, I remember that one.
Yeah, so that was definitely what was going on.
It was embarrassing.
I remember, my very first gig, barely knowing what I was doing. Actually, and I'll omit the names to spare the innocent, but I was staffed as a developer on a particular ETL tool. Mm-hmm. I had exactly 4 days of training.
Oh boy.
And nowhere in the training did they mention how to actually go to like file open.
Whoopsies.
It was just already open.
Yeah.
So I quite literally did not know how to open the tool. And so show up, it was back in the day, pre-COVID, where travel was very, very serious and everyone was doing it. And I was entering a project that was like in its war room, triple red phase. So we were actually sitting in a big war room, our project team, with the CIO who was funding that project. And he actually sat directly next to me.
Oh boy.
And I was introduced as the guy who was going to get development back on track, et cetera, et cetera.
The superhero.
The superhero, and literally did not know how to start the tool that I was supposed to work in with the CIO, who was, probably my 6 times up boss.
No stress at all.
No stress at all. It went fine. I used the restroom a lot the first couple of weeks, made a call, Googled some stuff on my phone, and we were good to go. But that's how I entered the industry. It's been a fun ride since then. A lot of hype cycles navigated, hopefully a lot of real work done kind of in the middle of that. As you indicated, I run the CPG and retail practice at Wavicle Data Solutions. I've been focused in that space probably for the last 7 or 8 years, smattered around a little bit of healthcare, a little bit of financial services, but have been focused, like I said, in that space for 8 to 9 years, and kind of work all across the data space. From a services point of view, strategy, advisory, design, build, implementation, production support, person that you can call to yell at when you get angry.
Yes. The throat to choke.
Right, exactly. All of those roles. And then in terms of, capabilities at Wavicle and within my practice, of course, some are related to those, kind of service offerings, but of course, we're focused on some of the more traditional foundational data management type practices, governance, and that type of stuff. That can be a big accelerator to some of the cooler things that are evolving today. GenAI being one, data science in general, advanced analytics, traditional BI at enterprise scale, I think can be pretty cool. It's difficult to run a business if you can't understand, your sales by state, as an example, with some level of fidelity.
Yep.
And it's been a fun time to be in the space. So, I would say retail particularly has been on an interesting journey through COVID and then coming out, really front of line when you talk about like supply chain and inventory and, BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, and navigating to that and the acceleration. And then out of kind of like transitioning out of that, it's been an interesting journey. Rode the wave. Can't wait to write the book in 10 or 15 years from now, but that's what makes me cool.
That's really a good reason to be cool. Those are awesome. And on top of all that, your education, I've heard that you're a legal person.
Who told you that?
That true?
That is true. I am a reformed attorney. I practiced mostly in the tech by trade, as an undergraduate student, and then had the delusion of grandeur that I would practice IP and law in that space. I mostly focused on text transfer as it happened, but did practice for a few years.
Nice.
And it was a little combination of things that kind of pushed me into consulting. One was, frankly, the job market
Mm-hmm.
around 2008, 2009, 2010 space. For those of you that remember back then, those were interesting times to navigate. And then secondly, and I mean this with just complete love and adoration for my legal brethren, super important, needed to support industry, but I just found myself kind of wanted to work on the side generating the contract and generating the legal questions
Mm-hmm.
versus dealing with those legal questions. And I thought that was a pretty good indicator to look for a career switch.
Nice.
At that time, I basically, was doing a little bit of boot camping on the side,
Mm-hmm.
SQL, Perl, stuff like that, and was given a shot at a little consultancy. And the rest is a minor footnote to history.
Love it. Love it. It's interesting, all the backgrounds that we have in data science and AI. You never know where
Mm-hmm.
someone's been and where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about the top challenges and opportunities that GenAI brings to the retail experience. So what are some first examples? Like, could this be something really simple when we talk about generative AI? Because when people think about that, they're not quite sure what to think of right now. It's like some giant thing, but it could be something really minor. Do you have a few examples?
Yeah, I think there's a couple really practical examples. I think when folks think of retail, it probably means different things to different folks. Obviously, it's a lot going on in that sector, but buying clothes, buying groceries, that definitely falls under the umbrella, and that's something we all deal with in our day-to-day lives.
Sure.
And one space that generative AI has been very helpful, in both of those subsectors, and I'll take grocery first, is offloading some of the thought around grocery list generation. What am I gonna make for dinner on Thursday? Just a really great helper. I mean, it's kind of human in the loop type stuff, but so many grocers, although they've learned from each other over the last 18 months, there probably is there's a use case out there folks can Google where one of those recipe chatbots did start recommending arsenic after about 6 or 8 months.
Whoopsies.
Got our hands around that. Don't do that, kids, at home. But overall, interacting with the recipe chatbot, hey, 8 mouths to feed, 3 kids, 1 dairy allergy. What do I make for a quick dinner on Thursday? Not only does it suggest 3 or 4 things, but once you click, it actually generates your grocery list and can pull those then interact with kind of the fulfillment side of the house, pull those groceries off the shelf, and you can do a BOPUS right to the store.
Right.
So it used to take a lot of thought capital, especially after a long day of work. What am I going to make for dinner?
Right.
I got to get this spice, and what is saffron? Is it golden? Whatever, that type of thing, and even budget constraints. So it's made some of those things like really practical. It's a lot easier to pick a recipe, try something new, generate a grocery list, and go. And kind of the analog over in the retail space, obviously it can, there's a lot of chatbots and other interactive things that can suggest shirt, pant, shoe combinations, things of that nature, if then type stuff. But also on the customer service front, particularly when you're looking for inventory and size up and how to navigate those type of things. Chatbots have made that a lot easier. So, if you've been to Zappos or Amazon, or particularly Walmart has launched a GenAI e-com, chat assistant that they've been very public about. That's generated a lot of conversion, a lot of traffic in all those spaces.
Nice. So something as simple and common as a grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
you can use generative AI to help create a list and come up with like meal plan for the week,
Exactly.
which is way easier than trying to debate it and argue and go find this item and all that.
Yeah.
And then you also gave the example of clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Garanimals? You're probably too young for that.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, the guys used to use
That sounded like a
these-
great punk band, was it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was cute. They used to have I think it was mostly men's clothing, but they would have like a tiger on the shirt, and then there was tiger on the pants and tiger on the, and so you match up the tiger,
Oh.
and you would know that goes together.
Yeah. And you'd say, there goes a granimal.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in some ways, it sounds like generative AI can also help with like even clothing purchases and making things easier for people.
Absolutely. And especially if you're going kind of brand first e-com, which a lot of people do. So, North Face is serviced if you want to do BOPUS, or, if you want to, get your pickup online. You're in Chicago as an example where we're recording, it can be very helpful to kind of coordinate, an outfit and then tell you where you're going. Are you going to Nordstrom's and you're going to et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. What about
together on the back.
in store? Is there immediate point of sale generative AI examples that you can give?
Yeah, well, I think that's emerging a
Okay.
little bit more,
Okay.
but there definitely is traction there, and also some, I would say, medium-term future use cases that is generating a lot of excitement in the space. When you think about, I would say, and this kind of ties into a broader use case, Gen AI for, I would say, micro customer segmentation and experience and journey enhancement. So when you think about retail, I mean, basically, you're talking B2C type stuff for the most part. And so there's an opportunity there to be very personalized. And, the more personalized, basically the better conversion is what the data has shown over years. People want to see what they want to see. They want to buy what they want to buy. That's the holy grail.
Yep.
So that's happening, I would say, digitally for sure. Outside of this brick and mortar store channel, when you think about email campaigns, your e-com experience, that type of stuff. But in store, tying into like retail media, so some of the content that you might be served up, in aisle or at checkout. Based on your loyalty number or even perhaps what your basket analysis has been, via OCR or other type of like quick visual, scan stuff, serving up particularly relevant, media content or experience. Hey, did you check out, the ham in aisle 16? That complements the cheddar cheese, the boar's head cheddar cheese that you purchased, quite well, type of thing. So I'd say overall, enhancing customer experience in store. There's a lot, and I think there's another couple of major use cases. I'll mention one that jumped to mind, and that's, I would say, inventory replenishment in store. So when you think about kind of monitoring, video and some of those things. Oh, hey, we've experimented with shelf analytics for years, demand forecasting, and frankly, even sensors on shelves. But now we can, with an investment, really detect, hey, you're in real time low on white cheddar rice cakes, just to pick a favorite example from the Simmons household.
Right.
And you can do in-store replenishment and, probably circumvent, in most cases, trying to flag down the Target employee in the red shirt that you can never find. God bless you, Target, when you're looking to see if something's in the back.
Yep, unless you pick on some poor schmuck that showed up in a red shirt and khaki pants. Yeah, that's difficult.
That's been me a couple of times.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I admit that. So it sounds like a lot of it has to do with the consumer and centering around them. In the past couple of decades, we've moved from sort of mass marketing, kind of one size fits all, and then we moved into segmentation, and then we moved into the hyper, and now we're almost extremely personalized down to the individual, and even maybe the individual in a certain circumstance. And the AI and generative AI are able to make those type of granular recommendations around the consumer. Sounds great. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, a lot, of course. I mentioned the arsenic example. Obviously, when it comes to content, and especially when it comes to brands' relationship with their customer base, that's the most precious commodity that there is to a retailer. Brand is hard to build, and its relationship to its customer is also, very important. So there's a reluctance to take a human out of the loop when it comes to the experience that you're putting in front of the customer. So obviously, as those models start to drift and hallucinate, which will happen without proper tuning, attention, and fundamental investment up front from a maintenance point of view, that runs a pretty high risk. And so I'd say overall, where most retailers are at is they're taking advantage of use cases internally, trying to build up their competency. There are some, I would say it's an interesting hype cycle in that there's definitely executive level enthusiasm and excitement. At the same time, I would say there's, SVP level and some director level reticence because of some of those challenges. Ultimately, what I've been telling my customers is, if you think about your YouTube algorithm or maybe your Instagram search algorithm, which, for a lot of people, maybe me, is, pretty precious to them. They don't, if you throw something into the algorithm, that's going to mess up, what's served. And you find very interesting things in terms of what's served up to you. I think Instagram's a great example of targeted ads based on content. At least me, anecdotally, I mean, it's always the shoe or the hat or the vacation experience.
So don't let your spouse borrow your phone for a minute.
Yes,
and
which is another good reason.
Yeah, I got you.
To do that. And so if you extrapolate that out, and you kind of run it out 10 or 15 years, our view is that living life algorithmically can be a real benefit to folks. So when it comes to whatever you're purchasing in a retail context, food, clothes, et cetera, convenience store, home goods, whatever the case may be, try and kind of push that same algorithm that you're curiously experiencing digitally into real life, but happening digitally in the back end. The clothes that you like, the shoes that you like. And, I think we're in an interesting push-pull moment here in the short and medium term because, folks, to some degree, and I think they probably always will, enjoy that tactile interaction with what they're purchasing and that human-to-human touch, and that's great. But, our view is that may start becoming boutique and niche, and we free ourselves up to be focused on more high-value tasks, hopefully spending time with family and whatever it is that you want to do, and a little less time doing the things that you don't want to do, grocery shop, pick out, which shoe, especially, and even if you like shoes, and you like spending that time, maybe you find value in finding just the right one or the shoe that you never knew that you would, like or or that type of thing. So it's an exciting frontier, and I think that's where the weather vane is pointing.
Okay. So to summarize, I think if I can try to bullet some of what you just said.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned the damage and the difficulties associated with losing brand equity or modifying the image that a company is giving when you're using generative AI. You kind of hinted about the emotional and the psychological difference for a consumer to not get the satisfaction of doing certain things that maybe they didn't realize they even enjoy doing or get some sort of,
Absolutely.
I get to check a box because I found the saffron, to give an example you gave earlier. And just the difference of going about life in that way. So if those are some of the most common damages, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, is it, with some people, retailers in particular, because retailers are sort of on the crest, would they potentially say like, well, you know what, it's too dangerous, it's not worth it? Or are the benefits so great that everybody's going to at least give it a shot?
Yeah. Well, I think the short answer is yes. The benefits are so great that people are going to give it a shot. I do happen to think that most of those use cases are somewhere between incremental and really positive growth, as opposed to kind of like exponential enhancers for the business. There's a lot of internal use case retailer, and this is cross industry. Retailers, the same as the financial sector, same as the insurance sector. A lot of internal productivity boosts, which, I believe if code generation, task automation, email generation, et cetera. But then when you think on the customer side of it, same, so to pick up an example from earlier, if you are automating your Thursday night grocery, shopping based on meals, maybe there's some incremental sales, hey, would you like to try that golden saffron that you've never tried versus
whatever,
other saffron,
boring,
pepper,
boring spice,
whatever we're using. But you're not probably buying 2 meals or 3 meals because of that convenience. And those are kind of what those use cases do. It helps drive convenience. It helps drive brand loyalty. It helps drive customer experience. But those are all incremental pieces. So I do think brands need to be thinking of it in that way. So, it is something that can be bottom line beneficial, grow top line margin, and grow your customer base. So in that sense, your competitors doing it, you need to be interested in it. But I also think that you need to be positioning it right, from a forecasting point of view, and to your board as they, read the New York Times and hear about this explosive thing called generative AI. It is interesting, and it is game changing in terms of how we live our lives. And I'd be interested to revisit this podcast in 5 to 10 years. There probably are some industries where it's truly game changing. You can see exponential growth, or even new industries crop up. But real positive incremental uplift for, a relatively, in terms of ROI, cost neutral investment.
Yeah. Okay. And so if you think about, if you project and then project some more and project some more, and let's say we're 20 years
That's what
out.
we do on podcasts.
That's right. What do we see? What do we see happening? Like, is there just almost no human-to-human interaction anymore? Like, are retailers asking consumers to constantly self-serve? What's that going to look like in the future?
Well, I think certainly a lot more. I think it's an open question, not to get too philosophical here on the Tag podcast, but I'll just even speak, anecdotally for myself. Some reason, when I'm interacting with a chatbot, it feels fine until I know it's a chatbot, and then it feels a little different. I think AI will get a little better at, being able to emulate a human, and you may never know the voices there. And I think, culturally, we'll all get a little bit more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to believe, I think as personal philosophy, that human connection is important. And so I do think that there are probably some pieces that will remain probably forever. And I think we're in a little bit of an experimentation stage as to, what folks would prefer to automate
Mm-hmm.
and what folks would prefer to be face to face. Obviously from the business point of view, they want to push cost takeout. So that'll kind of influence how that trend evolves over time. And I think people will get comfortable with things. But I do think there'll probably be some, guideposts that continue to be human to human interaction. I do think that there'll be kind of some, not like going to a record store perhaps today,
Mm-hmm.
is interesting and novel for some folks still and fun, as opposed to, firing up Spotify just because that's a fun interaction and a fun way to spend time. But
I mean, I miss Blockbuster.
Yeah, same. I was more of a Hollywood video guy. But yeah, I get it. Yeah, overall, I mean, I'd say that's probably a clean way to put a button on it. I think a lot of those loops when it comes to, retail, omnichannel, thinking about buying, prepare to buy, fulfill, review, buy again, type of stuff. It'll, maybe look a lot like the digital music space in that most people are comfortable in that digital space, but there are still record stores,
Mm-hmm.
more of a boutique, more of an experience, but niche.
Right. Okay. Great. And for our last question, what final piece of advice would you give to somebody in the retail space interested in implementing more generative AI solutions?
Experiment internally first would be the number one thing, and I'd say that probably goes, well, maybe certainly with data, but maybe, even outside of the data space. Fail fast, but never fail in production, and certainly don't fail in front of your customers.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit to be gained from generative AI, even within your IT shops. When you think about things like code generation, QA remediation, things that can really be an uplift for an IT shop where you can start building up a competency, demonstrating some internal wins, that type of thing. And the other bit of advice I would say is, definitely fly cautiously. But there are, for those folks that have navigated hype cycles before, there are opportunities to hitch your wagon to, executive hype cycle, societal hype cycle things to, enact your agenda. Gen AI is definitely one such case right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, be smart, definitely set realistic expectations. But this is a great time to get, as an example, some foundational work done that's perhaps always been on the agenda. If you can connect that, to a generative AI use case that's
Mm-hmm.
of interest to the, to the customer base as well as to your executive suite. Hey, to get this, we have to do that.
Right.
And so I'd say to folks that are managing a data and analytics budget, to be aware that make some hay while the sun is out.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you so much to Andrew Simmons from Wavicle Data Solutions, which happens to be our sponsor of Tag Data Talk this year, for talking to us about top challenges and opportunities generative AI brings to the retail experience.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
23. I know you got to go.